Hello, friends. The tongue can be a deadly weapon. Have you thought about lately how deadly your tongue can be? And what I mean by that is when you speak, when you talk, when you deliver a message in your relationship with your friends, have you noticed that some of the things that you say can have effects on their mood, can affect the way they view you, can even destroy relationships? I don't think we spend enough time thinking about this. A lot of times we think about it after we've caused the damage, right? We reflect, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Have you ever had it happen to you where you think about, oh my God, what did I just say at that party? What did I just say to my coworker? What did I just say in that setting? That was inappropriate. Because we never think proactively, or we hardly do, to avoid those type of situations. So we really want to think about that, particularly if we have close relationships where we have a spouse, we have children. We want to evaluate whether or not what we say and when we say it is uplifting, constructive, loving. We want to really take in consideration how other people feel about what we say, because ultimately it's going to hurt us if we don't use our tongue appropriately. So what are some of the negative aspects of not using your tongue correctly? Well, one, long-term consequences. What you say can have a long-term consequence on your relationships. If you hurt someone else with what you say, they may not be able to forget that easily. You may not be able to just erase what you just said. It may actually last for decades. Think about it. Have you ever been in a relationship where somebody said something to you that to this day you struggle with, that you have not been able to forget it? Have you ever had your parents or a family member, maybe when you were growing up as a child or an adolescent, say something to you that you still remember to this day? Think about how hurtful that was. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person that doesn't think before they speak and ends up saying things that hurt other people. The other thing that not thinking before you speak can cause is negativity. You can create a negative atmosphere in your surroundings, at work, in your family. The minute you get home, people look at you and they're like, they feel this negative energy because you're constantly using your tongue inappropriately. You're constantly complaining. You're constantly saying things that are not uplifting or loving because you're not thinking about what you're saying and the consequences it's having on your atmosphere. And that affects you. Sometimes what you say and you keep saying brings you down and down and down and down, and then brings up everybody down. And you don't realize how much of an influence you're having on other people and on your environment. It can even hurt you at work and your progress at work because people pigeonhole you into this negative person and they see you as a pessimistic person maybe, or just a person that you don't feel good around. I mean, not using your tongue appropriately has so many negative aspects to it that you really want to take the time to figure out how to avoid saying things you shouldn't. So the number one thing, you want to take a few minutes to evaluate what you're about to say. Take a few seconds even and think about it. And what am I going to say right now? Is it going to be positive or uplifting? Think about it. Don't just have a knee-jerk reaction to a response to what someone said. Particularly if you're feeling angry or frustrated, you may feel like, I want to respond immediately. And for the most part, when we're in that state of mind, what we say is usually negative and contributes to even a more negative situation that worsens the more we speak. So take the time. It'll be worth it. Pause for a second. Pause the conversation. Take a few minutes. Walk away if you have to, and then come back after you have reflected on the situation you're in and what you're going to say and the effects that's going to have. It's not always easy to do that, and you may have to pull back from the conversation. But it will be worth it because you potentially could avoid causing more harm to your relationship or to your surrounding, your situation, or even the perception of you, okay, which is very important. You also want to evaluate whether what you're about to say is going to hurt the person you're talking to, if it's going to be harmful, or is it going to help the situation. So that's when you start gaining control of your tongue, right? When you start thinking this way, when you start asking yourself questions, like if someone said that to me, how would I feel? How would I react? How would I want them to deliver this message? Vital to sustaining positive, loving relationships for you to take that step. Another step you can take is ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of what I'm about to say? Because when you ask yourself that, you can then evaluate whether or not you're responding to something out of anger, out of pain, or you're responding from a loving place. Okay? So ask yourself these questions. And that's another question you can ask yourself. Is what I'm about to say coming from a loving place? Because if it's coming from a loving place, many times you'll find that you're going to say something that's going to be uplifting. Okay? But that question doesn't end there. Because just because it's coming from a loving place doesn't mean that what you're about to say is not going to hurt the other person. Okay? Because if you're critiquing them, right? If you're giving them some feedback, you may have to evaluate whether or not the timing is appropriate. Maybe this is not the right time for you to say what you're going to say. Maybe it's not the right venue for you to say what you're going to say. Maybe the people who are present in the room shouldn't be hearing what you're about to say. So that's another step that you have to take. You know, when you stop, you pause, you think, reflect on what you're going to say, but then think about, wait a second, is this the appropriate setting? Is this the appropriate mood? Is the person going to be receptive at this moment of what I have to say? It's like when you're dating, right? There's certain things you can say in the first date or the second date that people are going to be receptive to. You know, if you go on the first date real strong and you start being complimentary and you start thinking about or saying things about how in love you are and how wonderful this person is, it may not be receptive. They might not be receptive to that information right so early on. Even if you feel that way, you may want to wait a little longer. And that's a positive thing, but it could be construed as something negative. It could be perceived. You may be perceived in a way that's not positive. So you really want to evaluate whether what you're saying is appropriate for the venue, for the time that you're about to say it. And then lastly, your tone. What kind of tone are you delivering this message with? What kind of tone are you speaking? Sometimes it's adequate for you to be excited, to use a tone of voice that's higher pitch, right? To be dramatic. Sometimes that is something that's appropriate. Other times you have to sort of use a whisper, talk in a soft voice, in a more loving fashion, okay? In a way where the person you're talking to will be receptive. You know, are you picking up on their demeanor, on their body language? Are you talking over here loud and being dramatic and excited and they're, you know, soft-spoken and calm and almost intimidated by you, you know? Or are you talking too soft for the venue? And the person you're talking to appreciates a more excited delivery and they're construing you as someone who can't get their message across. So you have to evaluate your audience. You have to understand who you're talking to, okay? And this is something that applies on a personal level and in a work setting, okay? You want to make sure that you're paying attention to your tongue, you're using it appropriately. So what are the takeaways? The takeaways is take control of your tongue. Make sure that you are aware of the effects that what you're going to say is going to have on other people and on your environment. Choose the right time, the right venue to deliver your message, to talk about what you're going to talk about. Use the right tone. And more importantly, what is the purpose of what you're going to say? Is it going to be helpful or is it going to bring someone down? Is it going to be hurtful? Okay? Are you being uplifting or are you being destructive? So every time you're about to speak or deliver a message, take some of these concepts and think about them. And if you do that, you'll have a lot more success in your social settings, particularly in your family, in that nucleus with your spouse and your children. You'll have a much more loving and positive atmosphere.